Hey everybody, so we're going to look at the idea of grassroots organizing and how the civil rights organization movement gets going here. Start with the idea of grassroots organization. Now, think about where grass is, very bottom down on the very bottom. Grassroots is a movement that starts at the very bottom and it starts working its way up, making impacts on the way up. Instead of a movement starting at the very top, say with a principal or say with a president or a congressman or whatever it is, it starts down the bottom. And civil rights movement will be an example of this type of movement where it's going to start at the very bottom and then make changes up at the top to fix corruption, unfairness, obviously unfairness being segregation, all those kind of things at the time. Now, we talked a little bit about the Supreme Court. Remember, Supreme Court has the idea of appellate jurisdiction. They can only look at previously decided cases. So from a local level case where it might be, and decide is that case or law actually constitutional. Now remember from last year, a Supreme Court justice has a lifetime appointment. So they're not voted in. President appoints them, and they're not supposed to be political. They're not trying to get reelected. They're supposed to be able to very look at the Constitution and make decisions without a lot of outside pressure. Now, their job is to check, as it says here, check all the laws, determine the validity of the acts of the Constitution, make sure they're all right. And so they can check, make sure the laws are actually right or not. And they're going to be doing that with all these laws about, segregation, so on and so forth, in the 50s. Now, the court this time was called the Warren Court. It was named for this guy here, named Earl Warren. He was appointed Supreme Court by Ike Eisenhower. Okay, and originally he was supposed to be conservative, but became more and more liberal as the court went on. Now, and so you kind of want to make more change. Now, there's two ways the court can really act: either be an activist court or doing judicial restraint. Activists means that they actually use their power of the court to get stuff done. Okay, they might be getting rid of bad laws or those kind of things to actually change things for the better in the country. Whereas judicial restraint means just trying to make sure things are quote unquote constitutional. And so we're going to see the court go from this very much this judicial restraint kind of court to a very activist court. And they'll get some pressure for that because some people say the court should have restraint. Other people say you have this power, use it, make changes, make the world better. And so we're going to see how this activist court gets involved here. Now, we're talking about school segregation. Now, here you have the idea of blacks and whites forced to go to different schools. And so all the schools down south essentially were single-race schools. You'd have some schools that were white schools, some schools that were black schools. And it didn't matter where you lived in town, you had to go to that school. There could be an African-American family living right across the street from a white school. They have to either walk or get bused all the way across the street to the African-American school. It was a big problem, huge inconvenience. Also, we're talking about being separate but equal. Yeah, they're separate, but are things equal? We talked about this in class on Monday, or we talked about it on Monday. Were things really equal or not? We'll be taking a peek at that as well. The NAACP, National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, started looking at this. And they actually looked at Topeka, Kansas as an example. Thurgood Marshall, the guy right here in the picture, was the lawyer for the NAACP that actually decides to look at the idea of was, separate but equal really true? Looking at this idea, was it really exactly true? And it all came down to a family who lived right near a white school but had to go all the way across town. And so the argument was that separate was not equal in practice, and that it was really actually kind of an unfair practice. And so they sued the Topeka School Board. Eventually, the Supreme Court decides that separate did not mean equal when it came to education, and that schools were supposed to be integrated. Okay. Now, one of the things the court said was that it was supposed to happen with all necessary speed, so that it was supposed to happen as quickly as possible. But it didn't. Okay, this decision comes down in 1954, and there are schools up to the 70s that are not integrated yet. In fact, you go to some schools, even some southern areas today, and it's still basically, not official, not legal segregation, but still pretty much segregated because schools do not integrate right away. And so that's kind of a decision that come along with that. Let's switch now to Montgomery, Alabama. And Montgomery, Alabama, most of Alabama for that matter, very, very deeply segregated, and especially in the city buses. I mean, city buses, there was the black section at the very back of the bus, white section at the very front of the bus. About 80% of bus passengers in the city of Montgomery were African American because maybe they couldn't afford cars to get around the city. Because of poverty and those kind of things that were happening. There was a group called Montgomery Improvement Association. They were trying to work to help fix discrimination laws, fix segregation. And they kind of looked at the buses and said, hey, there might be an option here. And the lady that ends up doing this is named Rosa Parks. Now, Rosa Parks had been involved in these movements for a long, long time. In fact, she worked as an investigator before that, looking at cases of rape of black women by white guys. And she looked at investigate those cases, try to bring them out. I mean, and she was a garment worker. She was tired for a very long day. She was on the back of this bus, and the bus driver had a little quote here. Are you going to stand up? She sat in the front as a white person came on the bus, and she said no. Bus drivers are going to have to be arrested. She says you may do that, and she refused to move to the back of the bus. And this was, obviously she did this, and it was kind of a planned idea. I mean, originally, the Montgomery Improvement Association wanted to have a younger girl do it, but Rosa Parks was chosen to be a better option to kind of start leading this whole deal. And now Rosa Parks, she worked with the Civil Rights Organization and creates this full movement, a full boycott of buses in Montgomery, Alabama. So the organizers, the Montgomery Improvement Association, helped set up carpools that you see here. Those who did own cars worked together to make sure everybody could get to their jobs, those kind of things. The leaders of this movement, man, they had death threats against them. So did Rosa Parks. There were bombings of churches and buildings and houses, that kind of stuff, attacks, lynching attempts, everything these things were happening. And what the media focused on, what the main goal of this was, the media focused on the nonviolence of the boycott versus violent reaction. Think about it. If 80% of passengers of Montgomery busing are African American, they're not riding the bus, what's going to happen to the buses? Oh my gosh, that's right. They're not going to be effective. Now, understand this boycott lasted 11 months. Eventually, the Supreme Court claims that these arrests that are taking place of those who didn't move, and Rosa Parks' arrest was unconstitutional. That bus segregation was unconstitutional. Boom, ta-da, these things start changing. Now, one of the faces of this movement was a young minister in Montgomery named Martin Luther King Jr., okay? He was a young Baptist minister. He had earned his PhD at Boston College. I married a young lady named Coretta Scott, became his wife. Very, very popular, great speaker. And he was one of the religious leaders that really helped organize this boycott. He really becomes the face of the mission. In fact, one of the bombings happened at his house, actually. His family was inside. He really emerges as kind of the public face of this boycott, along with other ministers and groups during the Civil Rights Movement. Now, after the boycott comes around, we start seeing this Martin Luther King Jr. become this basically nationwide civil rights leader. I mean, his eloquent speaking style really helped to his appeal. A young man, with a family, and who really he wanted to extend the lessons learned in Montgomery. Really say, hey, this worked here in Montgomery. Can we make it work other places too? Is the big question, and that's kind of the question that people want to bring out. And so Ralph Abernathy and Martin Luther King Jr. Called pastors, they worked together at a conference in Atlanta with 60 other Southern ministers, creating the SCLE, the Southern Christian Leadership Council, which basically discussed how the African Americans could non-violently try to make change. Okay, the non-violent means to achieve integration, force integration to happen. Actually, Ralph Abernathy, you see him next to King here, he had to leave the conference because his house was bombed in Montgomery. I mean, so it was definitely looking at doing non-violent things to get that violent reaction. And so King becomes president of this group and then try to find ways to use nonviolence, okay, whether it be through protests or other methods like the boycott to make this happen across the South and get integration to happen. Montgomery's that reason say, hey, look, it worked here, can work other places too. So the idea of nonviolence very simply is not fighting with authorities even when provoked to get that goal. You look to Gandhi, who used these ideas in India when India was trying to get freedom from Great Britain. Gandhi did this as well. And, examples of Gandhi was something called the Great Salt March, where, one of the things that happened in India was a big tax on salt. And Indians, who were very, very poor, couldn't afford to get salt. And it was actually illegal to go pick up salt from the beach shore and use that. And so Gandhi led a peaceful march of his followers all the way across India, a long march, a long walk. Reached down, they all picked up a handful of salt. I mean, they didn't fight, they didn't do that kind of stuff. If the British soldiers started pushing around, they just took it. They walked down, picked up a handful of salt, and said, "Arrest all of us." And Gandhi got arrested, but they couldn't arrest everybody. And so all these ideas of how to do these nonviolent protests kind of come around here. And King actually got to meet with Gandhi's followers and learn more about how to do nonviolence. I mean, these included boycotts and sit-ins, peaceful demonstrations, and how they're going to do these methods. What the SCLC did is they basically led workshops for local groups. So they had their big national group. They went to all these different little towns all around the place and taught them nonviolent resistance, okay? They taught people, hey, when people call you a name, they swear at you, call you slurs, those kind of things. Take it. Don't respond. Be stone faced. Don't get mad. Don't swear back. That makes you just as bad. They said somebody hits or kicks or punches you, whatever. Don't react. Okay. When someone's being attacked, try to form a circle trap, protect them, but don't start swinging. Think about it, ladies and gentlemen. We talked about this with Jackie Robinson on Friday. Could you do this? And that is one of the questions. Some people can, and some people can't. There are really four parts to the whole thing here. First is the idea of investigation. So first part is, you got to investigate the situation, okay? What's going on? What's the problem? How can you try and fix it, okay? You got to negotiate. Tell people, hey, listen, we need this changed, or here's what we're going to do. Then your protest has to be public, okay? It has to be out there. People need to see it, okay? Yeah, publicize what you're going to do. Make it known, okay? And lastly, you have to demonstrate. And so you have to go out there and do the actual demonstration. And when the punishment comes, you have to be willing to take the punishment. And you have to kind of plan out, so, okay, when we do this, what's a punishment that's going to happen that we can take? And are we going to be putting people in danger? And obviously people are in danger, but you're going to try to minimize the danger that's going to happen. So a couple of things are going on this time as do it. So one was integration. An example is the integration of Little Rock High School. 1957, after Brown v. Board, 9 black students tried to enroll in Central High School in Little Rock, and they're called Little Rock 9 because of that. Here's the newspaper clipping showing Little Rock 9 here. The citizens actually blocked the entrance, okay? So the people in this town blocked the entrance to the school and did not let these nine young students in. I mean, and the Arkansas governor actually had to take the National Guard and send them in just to actually deploy National Guard to not let the students into the school. So the state actually sent a military basically in to make sure these kids didn't come into school. Here's an example. Here's Ernest Green, young men. Here's the soldiers from the National Guard blocking off the school here. Now, President Eisenhower, okay, still president's point, actually had to take the 101st Airborne. So these are the people that were in, Band of Brothers, the hardcore soldiers of World War II in Korea, and sends them to protect the students. Okay, and he also takes the federal National Guard and federalizes. Basically says, okay, the Arkansas National Guard, you are now U.S. soldiers, and now you're going to be reporting to me versus anybody else. And eventually, the Arkansas 9 were allowed to go to school, and it wasn't a case of not being allowed, but they had to bring the actual military and let these kids go to school. And soldiers actually were at a camp. They actually stationed the soldiers nearby in case stuff flared up again. I mean, the whole time they were there, though, I mean, they got all this kind of harassment. I mean, one of the boys that was there, I can't remember his name now, in science class doing experiments, that he had, one of the white kids just threw acid right in his eyes, and he was, partially blinded. Another girl was suspended when she threw her lunch on a group of white boys that were picking on her and harassing her, and she got fed up and threw her lunch, and she got suspended. Then that happened to the boys. Nothing happened. But by the end, all of them graduated. Here's a copy of Ernest Green. You saw him in the picture right here. That's Ernest Green right there. That's Ernest. And right here is his diploma right there. It's kind of cool to see how that worked out for them. Happened in a lot of places. I mean, Governor of Alabama refused to integrate the University of Alabama. His phrase was segregation now, segregation forever. If you've ever seen the movie Forrest Gump, this is a scene in that movie where Forrest picks up the book and says, "Oh, here you go." A lot of schools refused. A lot of schools adjusted boundary lines so that, if there's a town with more than one school in it, all the black neighborhoods were assigned to one school, all the white were assigned to another school. And there was a lot of pushback to making this happen. It was a huge, huge, long, process as you see all these things that are going on. A lot of student sit-ins happen too. The idea of sit-ins got big popular here too. Students, a lot of black students who were in college became really interested in the movement, and they wanted to really desegregate some of the public places. So all these the big stores had lunch counters, so like department stores, okay, would have a little lunch counter. You buy burgers, that kind of stuff at it, and they were segregated. So white section, black section. Restaurants, white restaurants, black restaurants. Theaters, usually the black section was up in the balcony. And they thought that the best nonviolent method to fix this would be the idea of a sit-in. And so basically what you do is you would just get your group of people, you would sit in the segregated area until you were served. Okay, first was at a department store in North Carolina, and the 4 black students sat down, they were not served. And eventually, more students started joining them. Now, obviously, when this happens, there's going to be some pushback. I mean, these kids had things dumped on them. Where here you see, food being thrown at the kids here, hot coffee being dumped on them, all that kind of stuff happening. Burned with cigarettes, all that kind of stuff went down because they're doing this sit-in. and eventually it didn't spread. I mean, these things spread all the way. They got more and more events. Check part number two, guys.